Hello and welcome to Thursday Zoom. I hope you guys have had a good week. So how are you guys liking this module so far?
I like it.
I like it. It's interesting.
Interesting. See, one of my favorite chapters is Therapeutic Communication because, from the very first time that you guys met me on onboarding, what did I say was the most important thing? Communication, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, of course, that's my favorite. And I also like to learn about the diversity and ethnicity on how to deal with different kinds of patients. I just find that interesting. So do you guys have any questions before we get started with our slideshow?
No.
I do want to say, since we're recording right now, that I don't talk a lot about what we talk about in our everyday meetings. And one of my positives for today was my classes, because when I tell you guys you are doing your assignments, I mean, we're having some wonderful attendance. And I don't know if you guys know, but if you miss days, you come up on a report every day and we have to talk about you. And I am so glad that I'm not having to talk about anybody right now because everybody is on it. And it's not talk about you in a negative way, but to Unitech, you're not just a number. If something's going on, we had some students in the hospital, a student had an accident. We all know that. And so we all make sure that everybody's doing okay and what we can do as a team to help you. So I was just really, really excited this week to say almost every day, my students are rocking it. I want to say thank you for your daily engagement. Thank you for the wonderful answers I'm getting on these assignments. These critical thinking questions can go one or two ways. You could answer with 2 or 3 words, but then another student may answer with a very thought out answer. And so remember that when you're answering these questions, make sure you're thinking about them, because if, for example, if in my grading lineup, I have Markira, Connor, and Tori, and they wrote paragraphs, and then Jenny wrote 3 words, how am I going to grade that versus, I'm not saying that Jenny has to write the same thing. I'm just saying, make sure that your level of work is up there. Right now, I'm going to say 98% is great. So, and also I want you to watch your grammar. The first word of every sentence needs to be capitalized. I sent Ms. Tashi an email earlier and I did not capitalize the first word, and I almost had to just text her back and say, I am so sorry. But I figured she knew I was in a hurry and she didn't notice it, but I noticed it immediately. I'm not the grammar police, but those are the simple little things. When you're writing a professional email in your career field, you're not going to want to do that. So start practicing your grammar skills right now and double check what you're writing. Make sure that your punctuation is correct and your spelling is okay. All right, now that I got that out of the way, let's get to our slideshow. All right, can you guys see?
Yeah.
All right, so today is 5/18/2022. Where has the month gone? I have no idea. We're going to review chapter 1 and 2, and we're going to do some NCCT prep questions. So the first thing we're going to do is some announcements. So on May 29th, which is a Monday, we are out of school for Memorial Day. Now, the Friday before Memorial Day, let me get you the date. I believe it's 5/26. Yes, 5/26. I'm going to be taking a personal day off, but I will still be available for text messages. I don't even know why I say it's a day off, because you guys wouldn't know otherwise, but I'm actually taking that day, but I will still be available to you. We have an upcoming event. Career Services is Miss Nikki is going to be doing Nailing the Interview. That's going to be May 31st at 3 o'clock. And then module 151 is going to end on 6/5/2023, which sounds like we have a lot of time, but you guys know time keeps rolling. Your week at a glance is loaded for next week already. So I want to tell you that Memorial Day and your upcoming event is already in your news and announcements on your e-learning in Zanzibar. So if you forget the dates, it's in your news and announcements. All right, so the first thing that we're going to talk about is responsibilities of a medical assistant. Now, have you guys noticed that in this chapter 1 and 2, they talk a lot about medical assistants, right?
Yes.
We are not really medical assistants. We are administrative medical assistants, but sometimes a facility, if it's a small facility, they won't hire a separate administrative medical assistant to run the front office. Either they'll hire someone that's trained up front and then cross-train them to be a medical assistant to take the blood pressure and things, the weight and things like that. And then sometimes they'll take a regular medical assistant and train them for up front. So that's the reason why these things are crossing over. And I probably have reminded y'all 100 times. I know that this is for medical assistants, but some of these things kind of cross over. So that's why we continue to talk about them. So I am just going to talk about administrative skills right now. So answering the telephones, that's kind of a given, right? It doesn't matter where you work, except for the physician, correct? Everybody answers the phone, even the nurses sometimes. Managing patient scheduling. When we did SIM charting, some of you were with me with SIM charting. You guys learned how to do that. Creating and maintaining patient health records, again, in SIM charting. Documenting accurately in a paper record and an EHR. So in SINLAW, in my little area, most of our doctors still use electronic and paper charting. I don't know when you guys go to the doctor what you notice, but I just noticed for me, they still use paper charts. And what's going to happen is that's most people, most doctors. So you're going to have to be able to take your paper charting and put it in your EHR. Performing routine maintenance of facility equipment. Does that mean that you're going to have a drill and a hammer and a tool belt? No. What we're talking about is restarting computers, ordering ink for your copy machine, making sure that your fax machine is working properly. That's what it means by maintaining equipment. Performing basic practice finance procedures, petty cash, things like that. Coordinating third-party reimbursement, that's what a biller does. Performing procedural and diagnostic coding, that's what a coder does. Communicating professionally with patients, family members, practitioners, peers, and the public, everybody does that. Managing facility correspondence. As a front office receptionist, that's going to be one of your duties. Performing patient education and coaching initiatives within the scope of practice. Normally, the doctor or the nurse is going to make sure that the patient has education that they need. For example, diabetes. If a patient comes in and they're diagnosed with diabetes, usually the nurse or the doctor will give them the education that they're going to need. But sometimes the doctor may ask you to print some out or make copies of, and so that's where you would come in. Following legal and ethical practices, we all have to do that. Complying with facility safety practices. So customer service. I gave y'all a tricky question this week, and I'm so sorry. Do y'all remember what question I'm talking about? So it was a true-false question, and I can see where some people would answer true and some would answer false. Everybody got it right, no matter what they put in. If you got it wrong, I went back and marked it right. Customer service and patient service, in most respects, are the same thing, because the patient is our what?
Customer.
The patient is our customer. If we don't have patients, we don't make money. If we don't make money, we don't have a business. Just like Walmart, if they don't have good customer service with their cashiers, let's not talk real deep about that, because I know everything's so different now. In my day, customer service was the thing. But if you don't give good customer service, it just does not make people want to come back, whether it's a retail store or a medical facility. Another aspect of being a medical assistant is providing excellent customer service. Customer service closely relates to professional behaviors. One must be professional to provide exceptional customer service in healthcare today. Many of our patients have the ability to choose where they go to seek care. Do we have doctors' offices everywhere now? They have a choice about where they go. So we want to be the best at customer service, customer care, patient service. However you want to switch all of those words up, it means the same thing. The ambulatory care facility needs to attract and retain patients to remain open and for you to have a job. Two of the quickest ways to lose patients are to treat them poorly and act in an unprofessional manner. Happy patients will tend to tell others about their experience. Great customer service leads to successful healthcare facility and allows growth. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question. How the patient treats you should be a direct reflection of how you treat the patient.
No.
No.
Remember, we're dealing with people that may be sick. We don't really know exactly what's going on, but we know if they're coming into a doctor's office or a hospital or urgent care center. That's what I was trying to think of. An urgent care center. They're not coming because they want to, right? They may be coming for preventative services, which means, like they're coming in for their checkup and get their medicine refill. But a lot of people are sick and we don't know how sick they are. We don't know what they're going through. Yes, none of that is an excuse to be ugly, but we can't control what other people do. It is your job to stay calm and respectful, right? It's hard, but you can do it. You can. And if you get flustered, you can't go take a hot bath. You have to deal with it right then. Remember that question of how do we handle ourselves when we get stressed? And if it's a healthy coping mechanism or if it's an unhealthy one. We talked about all the wonderful healthy coping mechanisms, but we can't do those in that moment. In that moment, we have to deal with the situation. And then when we get home, we've got to take care of our personal mental space, right? But just remember, guys, that the nicer you are, the harder it is for them to be mean to you. Professionalism. As a healthcare professional, medical assistants represent the healthcare facility. They are viewed as an extension of the provider and the facility. A healthcare professional has high ethical standards, displays integrity, completes work accurately and in a timely fashion. Now, remember what I said when you first started, that I want you to use your college career and start training yourself to go to your actual career. I want you to treat the two the same. I want you to be timely on your assignments. I want you to be timely with communication. I want you to treat this like this is your career right now, because it really is. So any questions so far?
No.
Okay. Something that we got to talk about, because this is one of the most important things that you're going to learn in chapter 1 and 2, is scope of practice and standard of care for medical assistants. Can somebody explain to me in your own words, what is scope of practice?
Job you're responsible for performing?
Yes, that can be. Okay, so let me ask it in a different way. As an administrative medical assistant, name something that's in your scope of practice.
Documenting in the EHR?
Documenting in the EHR. Can you guys think of something else?
No, the administrative assistant. As far as filling, doing the vital signs.
Now, is that something that administrative medical assistant, is that something in an administrative medical assistant scope of practice?
Oh, no.
Okay, can you think of something that would be in the scope of practice?
Oh, scheduling an appointment.
Scheduling an appointment, great. Answering the phone, right? Now, my second question, Carrie, you've already given us a good one. Name something that is out of your scope of practice without proper training.
Something else is giving an injection.
Absolutely, you can't give an injection. Mark here already said taking vital signs. You are not, when you graduate this program, when you finish and you go into a healthcare facility, it is out of your scope of practice to do those types of personal care for a patient. Now, if you're trained and you feel comfortable and confident, then that's okay, right? So scope of practice is very, very important because it's going to protect you from being not well trained in what a facility is asking you to do. So just remember that. And I want to read this portion. One fact that is absolutely true about all practicing medical assistants: they are not independent practitioners, whether certified or not, regardless of length of training or experience. Every medical assistant must practice under the direct supervision of a physician or other licensed provider. That goes for an administrative medical assistant and a regular medical assistant. So we're going to talk about standard of care. What is that? Standard of care is a legal term that refers to whether the level and quality of patient services provided is the same as what another healthcare worker with similar training experience in a similar situation would provide. Standard of care set minimum guidelines for job performance. So you guys went through this chapter. Did you understand scope of practice and standard of care? You know, I think standard of care would also be with the facility as a whole too. So if you went to Dr. A's facility and everybody was dressed professionally, it was clean, they took your vital signs, excuse me, correctly, they cleaned the instruments, everything was good to go. And then you went to health center B and the floor was dirty and the bathrooms weren't clean and they were using the same instruments on everybody and you could tell they haven't been cleaned. I mean, I know that that's a dramatic representation, but can you see the difference in the standard of care?
Yeah.
The standard of care has to meet minimum guidelines. We want them to meet maximum guidelines. I don't want to have to deal with a dirty facility. All right, so we're going to watch a little video. It's not very long, and it's on verbal versus nonverbal communication.
Hi, I want to welcome you to our video series on therapeutic communication. So first, we're going to explore communication and then focus it on therapeutic communication for building effective relationships in the healthcare setting. So first of all, let's talk about communication nursing practice. This really just goes hand in hand because in nursing, it's a critical skill for all nurses with clients, families, and our healthcare team members. So why is communication so important? We do it every day. It's our day-to-day practice, but really in the healthcare setting, it helps prevent errors, makes outcomes much better for our patient and a much better patient experience. So any of you ever been in the hospital or a loved one in the hospital, you know that communication is so important with your healthcare providers and your team. So if you have effective communication, you have much better therapeutic relationships. So let's talk about different forms of communication and why those are important. First off, let's talk about verbal communication, which is what I'm doing with you now. It could be spoken or a written word to convey a meaning. So all things are going to influence this, such as how fast did I talk to you? Maybe even the inflection of my voice, how loud, how soft, etc. Something else to think about is even language. Next, let's think about nonverbal forms of communication. This one can be a little bit trickier because it involves all 5 senses in interpretation of its meaning. So things to consider are appearance, maybe how I'm standing, if I have my arms crossed talking to you and maybe frowning. So all of these gestures are going to influence nonverbal communication. Another unique form of communication is symbolic. This is where verbal and nonverbal symbols and icons are used by others. So a great example of this is going to be art and music. This is a great way to communicate in a different form that can be very therapeutic for your clients. Lastly, we have meta communication. This one's interesting because it's going to be a combination of all factors that influence communication. So what is meta communication? Well, this is a little bit interesting. So here's an example. Maybe you go to the doctor and you hate needles and you're going to get a flu shot. And as a nurse, I'm going to come give you a flu shot. And if you're squinching away from the needle when you're about to inject me, and I say, "Are you okay? Are you nervous about the needle?" And the patient's like, "No, I'm fine, it's fine." Now, if you see that, and obviously the person's verbal and their body language are not matching, this is a meta communication example. We just talked about different forms of communication. Now let's focus on therapeutic communication. This is a collection of techniques that prioritizes the physical, the mental, and the emotional well-being of patients. So for nursing, how does this apply? Well, we have to use these basic forms of communication to connect with our patient and make a therapeutic relationship. So we provide patients with support and information, but we also have to maintain a level of professional.
Guys, I know we're not nurses, right? But a lot of these things cross over. I just wanted to point that out. I do know that this is geared towards nursing, but it applies to everybody.
Distance and objectivity. Okay, now let's focus on specific forms of communication. So we've already talked about verbal and how absolutely important that is, such as the specific written word or spoken. This is definitely needed between nurse and our patient, nurse and our healthcare provider, and just the team in general to make the patient experience better. So let's look at some examples. So things to think about when we are giving verbal communication is, hey, first of all, don't interrupt people, right? Nothing is worse than your patient trying to let you know how they feel. The fact that they're communicating with us is great, but if you cut them off in mid-sentence, that's definitely going to shut off a piece of communication. The other piece is looking at affirming statements. So it's not that we have to stroke their ego necessarily, but just think about when they are saying, yes, I can understand how that's got to be difficult for you. So even those statements are letting the patient know that, hey, you're listening to them, you hear them, and you're on the same page with them. Another thought is to use open-ended questions, such as, hey, how are you feeling right now? If you've ever done this with a loved one or even a friend, you notice sometimes it just opens up the floodgates of the information that you get from that patient. So open-ended questions are a great way to use verbal communication. And next is summarizing it. Believe it or not, it's not mocking the patient. You're letting the patient know you've heard them, such as, hey, what I've heard you said is that this hospitalization has been very difficult for you. These are some things that's been really difficult, such as getting your lab draws or doing some of the tests were very scary. We understand that. So these are great ways of using verbal communication and connecting with your client to make that therapeutic relationship. So next, let's look at nonverbal communication. We talked about how it uses all 5 senses. So don't forget about how your posture is. Also think about your gait, how you're looking at the patient, your facial expressions. Let's think about some nonverbal examples. Making eye contact, maintaining personal space, and using therapeutic touch. I know some of these may seem kind of contradictory, but think about maintaining personal space. Let's say your patient's upset, they're letting you know how they feel. Maybe not getting in their personal space is always the best idea. The other thought is therapeutic touch, especially with the use of silence. I think as nurses, we really underestimate trying to talk to patients and trying to fix it for them, or maybe even saying the right things. But sometimes that's just being present, being there for our patient, maybe even putting a hand on their wrist or on their shoulder, and just being present in the moment is all that patient needs. The last thing to think about is the posture. So if someone's talking to you and you're kind of slumped, oh, you don't seem very interested, your body language isn't really making connection with the patient, this can be read wrong. The other thought is, especially in pediatrics, if we're looming over the child while we're taking care of them, this can definitely be looked as threatening for them.
Okay, so the next, did you guys have any questions about that? I just found it very, very interesting. And I know that we keep talking about communication, verbal and nonverbal, but it's so very important. So the next thing I'm going to talk to you about is cultural diversity. Cultural diversity supports the idea that every individual has a unique and positive contribution to make in society. Valuing cultural diversity comes from learning and understand others who are not the same. Discrimination between people hinders the bloom of cultural diversity, and contributions from different cultures make society rich. And then I just found this little saying that I thought was really nice. The beauty of the world lies in the diversity of its people. Now, because we have so many different cultures around us now, we always have to be aware. So I am actually not going to read all of these. These came straight from your textbook, but we need to be careful with eye contact and touch with some nationalities, right? Hispanics, Asian, Native Americans, and Middle Eastern, eye contact is considered rude and offensive. I really don't think that we have to worry too terribly much about these things. The word that I'm going to use is just be conservative. Just be conservative. They're going to give you cues on what they're comfortable with, you know, and I say that because I'm just a big old Southern mama and I just want to love on everybody and hey, how you do? And they're not comfortable with that, right? So we have to be careful, be very conservative. Gestures, some cultures using the come here finger is used with dogs and is considered offensive. I never would have thought that, right? But that's something to definitely consider. Winking. I think we all know that we shouldn't be winking at our patients, right? I mean, you want to say duh, right? But you know, it happens. Posture, many cultures consider poor posture disrespectful. And personal space. We just need to make sure that we're maintaining that personal, this is my bubble, this is your bubble, right? All right, so characteristics of a good listener. Okay, you guys know I've said before, this is what I'm working on. It's not that I'm not a good listener, but I have trouble not thinking about what I want to say and paying 100% attention to the person who's talking to me. So characteristics of a good listener is remain non-judgmental and neutral, refrain from interrupting with a comment or question, allow for periods of silence, smile and nod your head slowly to show you are listening to the message, use appropriate eye contact so the speaker is not intimidated, lean slowly forward or sideways toward the speaker, and avoid distractions. How cute are the ears? I just thought it was too cute. I had to use. All right. The next thing we're going to go straight into is NCCT practice questions. Now, some of you ladies do not know these answers. Please don't feel bad because we are going to be going through these things all the time. But we're getting ready to go into laws. And we're going to be talking about some of those things now. So, Jenny, you may know these already because we've gone through these a couple of times, but again, they're so important. I'm going to continue to go through them. So the first one says, which of the following activities is an example of abuse rather than fraud? Okay, remember when I explained the word abuse? When we think of abuse, we think of abuse, right? You know, somebody, you know, verbal abuse. When we're talking about abuse within this frame, we're talking about an unintentional act. I know it sounds contradictory that everything that we know, but in this kind of case, we're talking about an unintentional act. Fraud is intentional. Okay? So which of the following activities is an example of abuse rather than fraud? upcoding, misrepresenting the diagnosis, inadvertent coding errors, or billing for services not rendered. Which one of those things could be an accident?
C.
What does coding mean?
Upcoding means coding. Well, I'm sorry. I know that that's difficult because we have not been through coding with you yet, but upcoding means instead of coding for exactly what the patient got, finding something more expensive and coding that instead. It's like
Okay.
upcharging it. So which one of these would be unintentional?
C, I would think.
Yes, inadvertent coding errors. Those, you're going to make those as a coder. We all make mistakes, right? You're never going to code anything perfectly all the time. Even if the doctor codes it for you, he's not going to code something perfectly all the time. Okay, so which of the following legislations prohibits physicians from referring patients to an entity if the physician or a member of the immediate family has a financial relationship with the entity? I want to talk about that for just a minute. I want to call your attention to A and D. A is the anti-kickback statute. It has the word kick in it, right? What is the anti-kickback statute? So if I go to my doctor and I say, hey, doctor, if you will give me all of my health care free, I'm going to give you tickets to the Saints football games for the whole season. That's a kickback. So when you think of anti-kickback, stop and think about something monetary that they're going to trade. Hey, if you do all of my health care, I'm going to do all of your car work, you know, things like that. The Stark Law is directly related to referring to an entity that you have a financial responsibility in. I'm going to give you a real world example. Dr. A is a cardiologist. His sister, Dr. B, is a radiologist. He only refers patients to his sister because he makes money in this facility and this facility, right? Not supposed to do that. Okay, so now we know that it's going to be A or D, right? Which of the following legislation prohibits physicians from referring patients to an entity if the physician or a member of her immediate family has a financial relationship with the entity?
D.
The Stark Law, right? Very good. All right. Which of the following regulates healthcare billing for services that are not medically necessary? Now, what do we call a healthcare bill? What's another name for it? A claim, right? Remember our 1500 form that gets filled in and send it and they get paid? So which one of these things, which of the following regulates healthcare claims for service? Let's take out the word billing and say claims. Which one of these has the word claims in it? It's going to be D, the Federal False Claims Act. You cannot bill for things that are not medically necessary. Let me give you an example. If I go in to have, oh, of course, I'm just going to go. If I go in to have a finger repaired, and then they decide that they're going to also fix something that's not even related, say that I have a wart on my hand. They're not going to consider that wart removal as medically necessary because, first of all, you didn't get pre-approval for it. And second of all, it's not planned. It's not medically necessary within that realm. That's a terrible example, but my mind went blank. But the answer is going to be the Federal False Claims Act. So which of the following regulates healthcare billing for services that are not medically necessary? Federal False Claims Act. I am going to just tell y'all one quick story. My aunt passed away, and it's been lots of years back, but in the waiting room, my whole side of my dad's family was there, and they were having this huge discussion on how Medicare was ripping them off. Medicare is making me go have this done, and Medicare is making me go have that done, and Medicare is just getting all that money. I had to just kind of, not say anything because they wouldn't understand. But somebody can't just decide that they want to do something. It has to be a medical reason for it, right?
Right.
Like, I just can't go in and say, hey, I want somebody to scan my brain just because I feel like I want it. There has to be a rhyme or a reason to what's being done. That's medical necessity. Does that makes more sense? That makes me feel better, like it makes more sense. Okay. Which of the following regulations prohibits a physician from referring a patient to a facility in which the physician holds a financial interest?
Stark
C.
law.
C, the Stark Law. Very good. Again, we're talking about referring patients to a facility where there's financial interest. A local laboratory sent a physician 2 tickets to the football game as a thank you for referring patients to its testing center. Which of the following has been violated?
B.
B.
B, the anti-kickback law, because what are we getting? We're getting tickets to the football game because we're sending all of our patients over there, but there's no talk of one being financially responsible to another. It's just a kickback. It's, hey, I'm gonna do this for you if you do that for me. And that is it. So do you guys have any questions? Do you need anything?
No, I don't have